Archaeological evidence suggests that Sri Lanka has been inhabited for over 125,000 years, with the earliest human remains found at Fahian Lena Cave dating back to approximately 37,000 years ago. The island's first inhabitants were likely ancestors of the Veda people, who developed a hunter-gatherer culture adapted to the tropical environment. Proto-historic settlements emerged around 1000 BCE, showing evidence of agriculture, pottery, and iron working. These communities developed irrigation systems and established trade connections with the Indian subcontinent. According to the Mahavamsa, the principal historical chronicle of Sri Lanka, Prince Vijaya arrived from northern India in 543 BCE with 700 followers, establishing the first Sinhalese settlement. While this account is largely legendary, it marks the traditional beginning of recorded Sinhalese history. Archaeological evidence suggests that Indo-Aryan settlers did arrive around this period, bringing with them advanced agricultural techniques, the Brahmi script, and early forms of Buddhism. These settlers intermarried with indigenous populations, creating the foundation of Sinhalese civilization. The early kingdoms were centered around Anuradhapura, which became the first capital. King Pandukabhaya, 437 to 367 BCE, is credited with formally establishing Anuradhapura as a planned city, complete with sophisticated urban planning, reservoirs, and administrative structures. The introduction of Buddhism in the 3rd century BCE under King Devanampiya Tissa, 307–267 BCE, transformed Sri Lankan society. The arrival of Mahinda, son of Emperor Ashoka, marked the beginning of Theravada Buddhism's dominance, which would shape the island's culture, politics, and identity for millennia. The Anuradhapura period represents the golden age of ancient Sri Lankan civilization. This era saw the development of sophisticated hydraulic engineering, monumental architecture, and a complex Buddhist monastic system that became central to Sri Lankan identity. King Duthagamani, 161–137 BCE, is celebrated as a national hero for his successful campaign against the Tamil king Ilara. The period witnessed remarkable achievements in hydraulic engineering, with kings constructing massive reservoirs and canal systems that supported large populations. Buddhism flourished under royal patronage, with monasteries becoming centers of learning, art, and culture. The Pali Canon was first committed to writing in Sri Lanka during the 1st century BCE, preserving Theravada Buddhist teachings for posterity. The Chola invasion of 993 CE eventually led to the fall of Anuradhapura, ending over a millennium of continuous rule from this ancient capital. Following the Chola occupation, King Vijayabahu I, 1055–1110 CE, successfully expelled the invaders and established a new capital at Polonnaruwa. This period represented a renaissance of Sinhalese power and Buddhist culture, though it was shorter-lived than the Anuradhapura era. King Parakramabahu III, 1153–1186 CE, is considered the greatest ruler of the Polonnaruwa period. His reign marked the zenith of medieval Sri Lankan power, with successful military campaigns in South India and Burma, extensive hydraulic works, and magnificent architectural achievements. Parakramabahu's famous declaration that not even a drop of water that comes from the rain must flow into the ocean without being made useful to man exemplified the sophisticated water management systems that sustained Sri Lankan civilization. The Parakrama Samudra, a massive reservoir complex, remains a testament to this engineering prowess. The period also saw significant cultural and religious developments. The Galvihara rock sculptures and the preserved ruins of Polonnaruwa represent the apex of Sri Lankan art and architecture. However, constant warfare with South Indian kingdoms gradually weakened the kingdom. The death of Nisanka Malla in 1196 CE marked the beginning of decline. Successive invasions, particularly by Kalinga Maga from Kalinga, modern Odisha, around 1215 CE, devastated the kingdom and forced the Sinhalese to abandon the northern plains. The collapse of Polonnaruwa initiated a period of political fragmentation and territorial decline. The Sinhalese rulers retreated to the central and southwestern regions, establishing capitals at Dambadenia, Yapahua, Kurunagala, and eventually Kotte. This period saw the emergence of distinct regional identities and the gradual Tamilization of the northern and eastern regions. The Kingdom of Jaffna, established by Arya Chakravarti around 1215 CE, became the dominant Tamil kingdom, controlling much of the northern peninsula. The Kingdom of Kotte, established in the late 14th century, became the most powerful Sinhalese kingdom. Under King Parakramabahu 66, 1467 CE, Kotte briefly reunified the island, representing the last golden age of pre-colonial Sri Lanka. However, this unity was short-lived. After Parakramabahu VI's death, the kingdom fragmented into three separate entities: Kotte, Sitawaka, and Kandy. This division would prove crucial when European colonizers arrived, as a unified resistance became impossible. The period also witnessed significant cultural and literary developments. The Sandesa poetry tradition flourished, and important historical chronicles like the Kulavamsa were compiled, preserving Sri Lankan history and Buddhist traditions. The arrival of Portuguese navigator Lourenço de Almeida in 1505 marked the beginning of European colonization in Sri Lanka. The Portuguese exploited political divisions among Sri Lankan kingdoms, conquering Kotte in 1597 and Jaffna in 1619, leaving only Kandy independent. Portuguese rule introduced significant changes, including Roman Catholicism, new architectural styles, and systematic exploitation of the cinnamon trade. However, their rule was marked by religious persecution and forced conversions to Christianity. Resistance was constant, led primarily by the Kingdom of Kandy. The Portuguese never succeeded in conquering Kandy despite numerous military campaigns. The Dutch East India Company gradually displaced Portuguese power, beginning with the capture of Batticaloa in 1638. By 1658, they had gained control of most Portuguese territories, initially as allies of the Kingdom of Kandy, but eventually as colonial rulers in their own right. Dutch rule was more systematic and economically focused than Portuguese administration. They established a comprehensive legal system based on Roman Dutch law, which continues to influence Sri Lankan jurisprudence today. The Dutch also introduced new crops and agricultural techniques. The Dutch monopolized the spice trade, particularly cinnamon, and established extensive plantation systems. They also developed infrastructure, including canals and roads, and established schools that promoted literacy in local languages alongside Dutch. Unlike the Portuguese, the Dutch were generally more tolerant of local religions, focusing primarily on economic exploitation rather than religious conversion. However, they maintained strict control over trade and movement, implementing a pass system that restricted Sri Lankan mobility. The relationship between the Dutch and the Kingdom of Kandy was complex and often antagonistic. Several wars erupted, but Kandy maintained its independence throughout the Dutch period, controlling the Central Highlands and serving as a symbol of indigenous resistance. The British captured Dutch territories during the Napoleonic Wars, initially administering them as part of the Madras Presidency. In 1802, Ceylon became a separate British Crown colony, marking the beginning of over a century and a half of British rule. The most significant achievement of British rule was the conquest of the Kingdom of Kandy in 1815, finally bringing the entire island under European control. The Kandyan Convention of 1815 formally ceded the kingdom to the British, though it guaranteed protection of Buddhist religion and Kandyan customs. The British introduced sweeping changes to Sri Lankan society and economy. They established coffee plantations in the Central Highlands, bringing indentured Tamil laborers from South India to work the estates. When coffee blight destroyed the industry in the 1870s, tea cultivation replaced it, creating the foundation of modern Sri Lankan agriculture. The British also implemented significant administrative reforms, establishing a unified legal system, modern education, and efficient transportation networks. The construction of railways connected the highlands to the coast, facilitating both economic development and administrative control. However, British rule also created lasting social and economic problems. The plantation economy disrupted traditional agriculture, the import of Indian Tamil laborers created demographic changes, and the English education system created cultural divisions between the English-educated elite and the vernacular-speaking masses. Resistance to British rule took various forms, from the 1818 Uva Rebellion led by Keppetipola to later constitutional and political movements. The temperance movement, Buddhist revival, and the emergence of Sinhalese and Tamil nationalism characterized the late colonial period. The early 20th century witnessed the emergence of organized political movements demanding greater self-governance. The Ceylon National Congress, founded in 1919, became the primary vehicle for constitutional reform, though it was dominated by English-educated elites. The Dono More Constitution of 1931 introduced universal suffrage, making Ceylon the first colony in Asia to achieve this democratic milestone. This reform had profound implications, empowering the rural masses and leading to the rise of populist politicians. The emergence of communal politics marked this period, with separate organizations representing Sinhalese, Tamil, and Muslim interests. The All Ceylon Tamil Congress, founded in 1944, and various Sinhalese nationalist organizations reflected growing ethnic consciousness. World War II accelerated the independence process. Ceylon served as a crucial Allied base in the Indian Ocean, and Sri Lankan leaders supported the war effort while demanding constitutional advancement. The Salisbury Constitution of 1946 provided internal self-government, leading to full independence on February 4, 1948. D.S. Senanayake became the first Prime Minister of independent Ceylon, leading the United National Party to victory in the first general election. Independence was achieved through negotiation rather than armed struggle, setting Sri Lanka apart from many other decolonizing nations. The first decade of independence was characterized by relative political stability under UNP rule. D.S. Senanayake's government focused on economic development and education expansion while navigating Cold War pressures. The 1956 election marked a watershed moment. SWRD Bandaranaike's Sri Lanka Freedom Party won on a platform of Sinhalese nationalism, making Sinhala the only official language. This legislation triggered Tamil protests and institutionalized ethnic division. Bandaranaike's assassination in 1959 led to his widow Sirimavo becoming the world's first female prime minister in 1960. The 1970s saw increasing political polarization and the emergence of militant movements, including the JVP's unsuccessful 1971 insurrection. J.R.J. Wardine's UNP government, elected in 1977, introduced sweeping economic liberalization policies and a new constitution that created an executive presidency. These reforms opened the economy to foreign investment and privatized state enterprises. However, the same period witnessed the escalation of ethnic conflict. The 1983 anti-Tamil riots, triggered by an LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, attack that killed 13 soldiers, marked the beginning of a full-scale civil war that would devastate the country for 26 years. The LTTE, led by Velupillai Prabhakaran, emerged as the dominant Tamil militant organization, employing innovative guerrilla tactics and pioneering suicide bombing. The organization established de facto control over much of the northern and eastern provinces. International involvement complicated the conflict. The Indo-Sri Lanka Accord of 1987 brought Indian peacekeeping forces, which faced resistance from both the LTTE and Sinhalese nationalists. The withdrawal of Indian forces in 1990 left the conflict unresolved. The war caused immense human suffering, with estimates of deaths ranging from 80,000 to 100,000. The conflict displaced hundreds of thousands, destroyed infrastructure, and diverted resources from development to military expenditure. Multiple peace initiatives failed, including Norwegian-facilitated talks in the early 2000s. The 2004 tsunami, which killed over 35,000 people, temporarily created hopes for cooperation, but ultimately failed to bridge ethnic divisions. President Mahinda Rajapaksa's government launched a final military offensive against the LTTE in 2006, rejecting negotiations in favor of a military solution. The war ended in May 2009 with the death of Prabhakaran and the complete defeat of the LTTE. The final phase of the war was controversial, with allegations of war crimes and civilian casualties. The UN estimated that 40,000 civilians died in the final months, though exact figures remain disputed. The victory was celebrated by many Sinhalese, but viewed with concern by Tamils and the international community. Post-war reconstruction efforts focused on resettling displaced populations, rebuilding infrastructure, and promoting economic development in former conflict areas. However, reconciliation between ethnic communities remained elusive, with limited progress on addressing root causes of the conflict. The Rajapaksa era, 2005 to 2015, was marked by increasing authoritarianism, corruption, and Chinese influence. Major infrastructure projects, often financed by Chinese loans, transformed the landscape, but raised concerns about debt sustainability and sovereignty. The 2015 election brought a coalition government led by Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe, promising good governance and reconciliation. However, political instability and economic challenges limited their achievements. Gotabaya Rajapaksa's election as president in 2019 marked a return of the Rajapaksa family to power. His administration faced the COVID-19 pandemic and a severe economic crisis that led to unprecedented protests and his resignation in 2022. Modern Sri Lanka faces numerous challenges, including economic recovery, debt management, and ethnic reconciliation. The 2022 economic crisis, marked by fuel shortages, power cuts, and currency devaluation, led to mass protests that forced President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to flee the country and resign. The Aragalaya struggle movement demonstrated the power of citizen activism and cross-ethnic cooperation in demanding accountability and democratic governance. Ranil Wickremesinghe's assumption of the presidency marked an attempt to stabilize the economy through IMF support and structural reforms. Ethnic reconciliation remains incomplete, with Tamil grievances about war crimes, missing persons, and political autonomy unresolved. The northern and eastern provinces continue to lag in development, and meaningful power-sharing arrangements have not been implemented. Sri Lanka's strategic location in the Indian Ocean continues to attract great power competition, particularly between India and China. Balancing these relationships while maintaining sovereignty represents a key challenge for Sri Lankan foreign policy. Climate change poses additional challenges, with rising sea levels threatening coastal communities and changing weather patterns affecting agriculture. The country's biodiversity, one of the world's highest, faces pressure from development and environmental degradation. Despite these challenges, Sri Lanka retains significant strengths, including high literacy rates, democratic traditions, and cultural diversity. The island's history of resilience, adaptation, and cultural synthesis provides hope for overcoming current difficulties and building a more inclusive and prosperous future. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends. I also create videos on the history of different countries and empires, so check out those too.